Okay. All right, and we are live. We are alive, guys. All right. The title of tonight's episode is A Walk in the Gardens of a Conscious Life. And so my intention with this episode is to try to share, especially drawn out of certain experiences. It's as if I am using a memory like a line of poetry to kind of share a talk with you. And so perhaps I shall begin from an experience I had, I believe it was around 2011, 2012. I think it was 12, 13, around that time. And how can I give you a nice explanation here? The attempt at recognizing how consciousness is moving in a world of forms. Dear listener, Mr. Within finds that we personally are in a sort of garden of existential phenomena. This garden of existential phenomena is a suggestion. It's a suggestion that eyes have opened to emptiness first, and then what emptiness could hold. That means the story of our lives, this is kind of how language is designed. It is designed out of nowhere. What that means is before anything could be recorded in history, there was still communication, but it wasn't being recorded because there was no way of kind of having a parallel existence to the objective reality, you know? So the development of language was one of the greatest technologies that humanity has made. The fact that me and you can so easily speak right now was the efforts of so many human beings through history. On some level, we are in a dance with nature. So I personally consider that you can say 50% the unknown moves the known, and 50% the known moves the unknown. To be honest, the ultimatum of wisdom is very similar to the many state that children have. It is a pre-thought stage before the child adopts language, before this child becomes a character in a story that it is aware of. It's as if it's like reality is just phenomena oriented. So I'm telling you, fear of death is kind of ridiculous because before we had conceptualized and even become aware of death, it was just phenomena changing. So on some level, the nihilistic approach is very chaotic because the nihilistic approach, in some senses, is calling forth emptiness. Pretty much nihilists are worshiping emptiness. That means any idea you put, they see emptiness in there. You see, and it's not just nihilist. Buddhism has a lot to do with emptiness. It's as if Buddha, on some level, was saying that his true teaching was in the silence, but he had to say words because we have to contribute to the intention of the planet, which may not just be the intention of us as a being. Okay, let's open the skies. All right, guys, let's get into this. A lot of life is will eventually come across as ceremonial because the human body requires movement for activation. Sometimes your physical body needs to move before your mind can move in new ways. For me, it's kind of fascinating because when you really look and study imagination and what it could really imply, you know, there's a challenge in the prioritization of attention when a spectrum of options are valid. If there was only one human being, if I found myself to be purely alone, as if I felt there was nobody else except me in this whole cosmic existence, because certain schools of spiritual thought take the person towards a sort of cosmic solitude, a cosmic loneliness. In that cosmic loneliness, because the effect of everything is alone, one tends to consider the cause to be alone. So, at the beginning, the pilot of consciousness must first navigate their attention. They must learn how to navigate their attention. The pilot of consciousness is what Mr. Within considers to be the highest liberated state of being in this plane of existence. That means literally when you become responsible for both the objective value of your life and the subjective value of your life, a lot of this whole character building that goes on throughout just life, just it fades away because you're kind of getting street smart with existence, as if your eyes have opened and you're like, okay, I'm here, and then you're like, okay, what's going on, and then you're suddenly seeing that anything that we say we know is self-imposed. That means language without the word self cannot exist because who is there? You know what's very interesting? When we pay attention to physical reality, thoughts seem to be in the background. When we pay attention to subjective reality, objectivity seems to be in the background. This implies that the attention can move in different ways. That means your attention is a space where multiple phenomena is occurring. However, while this multiple phenomena is occurring, there is the ability to zoom in and zoom out. So the moment you can zoom in and zoom out into phenomena means that there is an observer beyond the phenomena that can observe beyond to maneuver. It's as if you gotta know where you're going before you turn on the engine of the car. Direction is important because the state of consciousness doesn't remain. This, like in some sense, What that means is a lot of people entering spiritual communities, they think life is just one present moment. And that is very valid on an existential, philosophical, contemplative level. But, but, how empty it needs to be is a total different discussion. That means if we thought emptiness was the truth, in some sense it would be as if, what is the point of being alive? Are we just atoms moving in space, or is there something more brilliant behind the ideas of uh, uh, engagement? What it is either you feel you know in the moment, or you feel you don't know, and both those feelings have to do with your inner attitude. You see, so what that means is when it has to do with the various levels and intensities in the moment in your state of life, opening up various ways that the mind knows itself. So this is very true. I'm a firm believer in the idea that the environment ends up becoming part of the subconscious of the person. That means your personality is a response to the environment. Who you are, what you are to say, is not something you have to all. In some sense, you can't analyze all of life because it's too much data. But with the data that you attain, you can wonder. So you see, there are certain levels of experience, just like how the person climbs up this kind of biological existence and eventually climbs down the mountain. So, similarly, in the subjective realm, one can say it is much more quicker. What that means is, in a moment, you have a thought on heaven, in another moment, you have a thought on earth. In another moment, you wonder about the vision of man. In another moment, you wonder what that vision is moving through. And in some sense, many questions open the heart of the being. But in some sense, I have realized it is only an honest soul that can see the honest soul. There is, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a man named Sogyal Rinpoche, and he has this kind of quote where he says, "Unless you conquer anger, your enemies will be inexhaustible." What that means is, unless you fix what is behind your eyes, what is in front of it will keep falling into the same value structure. So, how do you change the structure of your values? Well, it has to do with how you feel. If you feel you're more of a mind projecting a body throughout the day, then these kind of talks will serve you. The intellectual domain is helpful because it is constantly allowing you to reflect upon what is real. However, we have to realize we are biological beings. And to be honest, we shouldn't be too obsessed on behavioral configuration of creatures on this rock. To be honest, you cannot control people, and if you did, you're just making a world of clones. It's stupid. You see? So you see, it's like this is the danger of the utopia, that it can become like a lifeless machine. So sometimes in your life you need the ups and downs. And if you are a person living a life where nothing is happening for you, that is because you have not dared internally enter a world where you are already able. That's the thing. There's this kind of thing, like, of course, I'm going to animate it and kind of. I'll first tell you the original, and then I'll tell you how I saw the whole thing go on. There's the story of Kabir. Kabir is this Indian Vedic yogi, like enlightened sage, and he says to one of his disciples, he says, "Student, tell me." And the student's just listening, he says, "Student, tell me, what is God?" And the student says, "The breath inside the breath." But the way I kind of saw it to be more animated, it's as if it's not that the student says that. Or actually the student says, but I saw it in the way where Kabir asked the student, "Tell me, what is God?" And all these students are responding. It's kind of like, how can you ask for freedom if you're not willing to change where you are now? That is the main question. Life is one of those things where everybody's dealt cards, and the cards that you given, you look at it and you pretty much have to make the best decision after that. However, while in this journey of life of making constantly the next best decision, the next great decision, suddenly the person you free the world from thought, and you're left with direct experience. And where does direct experience goes? It's kind of like, let me tell you how the system of nature is working. It's as if the moment you stop being conscious, because there is forces at work, these forces will eventually move various things in your life. So it's one of those things, is because we're thinking we're a singular being, we feel that our attention has to be on one thing at a time. Okay, and because it has been such in such a way in so many societies, eventually the yogic mind came and brought a solution, in the sense that the solution was to have a single pointedness of attention. This is why meditation, in some sense, comes down to concentration as a key point. You know, so you're paying attention to one thing, and as you pay attention to that one thing, you penetrate the fabric of reality by watching how its meaning changes as your state changes. And eventually, you will find a moment in yourself where it doesn't matter what thought you are conscious in that state. So you become conscious of thought, but you don't become conscious of it in the same way as if there was an object in front of you. You become conscious of it in the sense that these are appearances, or you can say very playfully, if you're very secular, that what I'm talking about is the subjective extension of objective phenomena, and its elegance and its style, and how life is not just about the right wrong thing, because even robots you can give them a program of what is right and wrong and they can follow it. What we human beings stand in grander ways. Our intelligence commands us to remember where we have come from, and our intelligence commands us to design where we're going. And when we remember where we came from, we get access to the designs of the past. And when we wonder about where we're going, we realize that the present moment's free will dictates which potential parallel reality of the subjective realm animates. That means, literally, I've had moments in this life where I've thought about entering a room and being late to somewhere, and it's as if how that would have influenced the psychological structure and literally
what will happen, as if I have tried to predict my own future, you know, like what will happen next in the next moment. And I've noticed that prediction means that there has to be various other options, as if many dimensions are being considered and which parallel reality activates. So the mind is very fascinating because the mind is not embodied. If it was embodied, we cannot call it a mind, if we would call it just the body. It's something more than the body. It is kind of like the brain's dance is supernatural like. To be honest, I think the study of language surpasses the study of physics. And this is an incredibly bold statement, but this is why I'm saying that it doesn't matter how much physical reality is physical. Eventually, the experience of the person is as a journeyer. The person has opened his eyes, he's on this world for a little while, and he goes. And if the mentality of the overall civilization, which means the sum total of all societies on this planet, if suddenly there was this mentality, holy shit, we're all tourists in this world, we would try to make the experience efficient. So literally, you would see the mindsets of all those people dictating the next waves that occur, big waves in culture, suddenly focus on the sense that it is not, it's the liberation of the dimensions of man. You are not fighting for the freedom of only your speech. You're fighting for the freedom of the dimensions where even speech can be arise from. So, in some sense, when you no longer fear silence and stillness, you no longer fear and death. You no longer fear emptiness because it is there. It is there before you were. It's as if my death happened before my birth because it's as if the moment you're born, you know that it will end. So it's as if it's like, why should I fear the design of the system? This is the system, right? And so, really, what's interesting for me is just trying out the best option. Literally, I have this mentality that in any moment of your life, there is a genius vision. There is a missing puzzle piece that is the greatest thing you can do in that moment. And in some sense, the task is to find that instantaneously, believe it or not. And so, how it happens is eventually you have to. Here's the thing, if you don't feel good when you do something, you karmically don't allow yourself to enjoy what happens after. Our psychologies are very complex, and our behaviors influence how the psychological kind of experience of the person is sculpted. How you are subject to yourself has to do with how this object has experienced reality so far. But you're not just an object, and this is going against mainstream. But I'm like, our mainstream is not like the mainstream of now. Like the same complaints that are. How can I tell you? It's like history repeats itself, and so do people's complaints of what is real and what is not. It's a repeat. Literally, like you can input a random kind of data into a system, and that system just becomes a totally new universe. So Mr. Within is saying that there is a way you can walk in this life where the garden, you walk in the garden, you see the flowers there, you see the rose and the thorn, but you also see that alongside every objective thing, there is the ability for its subjective stance. So, as if the concept of life is physical, but the context is incredibly non physical. It can't be physical, it is the division of the dimension. So, pretty much this world, it's in a wheel of karma because the idea of the person is a dualistic notion. To be honest, simulation theory in modern times, as they speak about it, it's another way of saying, like, what if your eyes, this life, this physical life, was a blindfold upon a more deeper complexity of intelligence. You see, to be honest, it has only two directions it can go. Nothingness is when life is going towards such simplicity where it's too simple to have a complex meaning. And then the other way is it just becomes complex. So either you become an advanced creature or you are no longer a creature. Either the DNA, the pattern follows, and so really, this perhaps is a new mode of thinking. But I'm saying it in the sense that uh, the traditional mindset of constantly continuing the generation is now becoming how would I say it? Success can no longer be only one man's paradise. And if there is anything happening because of only one man's paradise, that system is hollow. The value of life is in the unknown. Do not fear the unknown. This is the only thing a mirror can say. The audience is like, yo, did he just call himself a mirror right now? To be honest, language is the mirror. When you read words on a piece of paper, what is that? What is that? You're just looking at ink on, a white surface. There needs to be chaos and order to act as wings for the mind. So literally, if you're a character in a story, tell me one story where there isn't chaos in it. Tell me one story where there isn't order. It's as if both elements are there, but the reason they are there is because I find primarily, perhaps it has to do with the hemispheres of the brain. Literally, Mr. Within is saying, like, just look at what the design is and you'll understand how it happens. So the issue with modern health, for example, like I was standing in this kind of like I was at Walmart, and it's like I was kind of waiting and I was seeing one of these magazines covers, which was from Oprah, where Oprah had written like there was on the cover there was this tagline that said like, um, "Healthy is the new skinny," something like that. And I suddenly was like, whoa. And I realized how many people perhaps may not have accurate views on their physical body. Perhaps the guy is actually being a physical person, but he, behind his eyes, does not see his physicality in the way that it actually is. And so your desires and fears, they can possess you. Let me tell you why. Because you are so being single, like you're just seeing one thing in a world where there's many things. Kind of like how Alan Watts said that it's like a philosophical uh, wonder how when two spheres in empty space in a vacuum spin around one another, you can't tell which is spinning around which because there is no room anymore in that vacuum. There's no edge of the wall. And so it's as if there's no way to have direction. So the only way we are directing ourselves in this world is by making a kind of snapshot of the world. We have to cut it up to a certain degree. Literally, Michelangelo can't sculpt a mountain. He has to get a chunk of rock and then sculpt it. And so what I'm trying to say is that it's like the attempt is very there's an elegance in the design of man's mind which is beyond language, and I don't like. There's no other way that a person can say it. The only thing that I've attempted is to just say that there's a language threshold. Like I created that word for it because nobody's used. Like it's like nobody's thought that. Like I don't know. I've never. How would I say it? It's like there's a limit. The way Mr. Within defines the language threshold is that the language threshold. How would I say it? It's like when you have an experience that can't be put into words. It's like, imagine if a time traveler came back from the future and showed you some technology and told you to go explain it to people, and then the time traveler left, and he's like, "Good luck. You try explaining this to people. Maybe you'd be a philosopher." And so then the guy went back and tried to explain it. And eventually he saw that the technology was so ahead of his time that he did not have even the language to explain it. And that's what the where the language threshold comes in, how we are in some bubble of language. You know, words have an architecture to them. They are like the structures where the attention of the mind manifests. Your mind is not just a destroyer, it is also a creator. And eventually creation and destruction become synonymous, which is a very chaotic thing to say. Let me tell you why. Because in destruction, the space, the emptiness of the space is being remembered, and in creation, also the emptiness of the space is being remembered. What that means is creation and destruction have emptiness in common. So in any moment something new is being born, it's like, how can I tell you, from space there came something in it, you know? We are still in an entertainment mode. The species hasn't cared for its mind yet. We're still living as bewildered creatures. It's as if we stepped out of the food chains, we're wearing suits and ties, but at the same time, the same animalistic urges seem to be echoing still. And the main reason for this, Mr. Within finds, is because I've mentioned it before, like numerous times, is because of this thing that since the era of idol worship, since that time, human beings have become ideal worshippers. And that means we have held on to the technology of language longer than we should have. And because we've held on to it so long, we have decided to allow our creations to conquer us. It's as if there is in certain ancient mythologies this idea that beings of the lesser worlds began kind of rebelling against their creator. It's as if the being who was suffering is like, why did you put this suffering here? You know, why would you design a world where a creature suffers? Why not? Why not? If you're going to create a mountain for a creature to climb, why not start putting the creature in the top? And then I realized, what if the bottom is the top? And that was a very transformative moment, because I realized the future and the past, what they share in common is they're both present generations. That literally in a present moment of existence, you are generating. Literally, the attention is spiking out in various ways. I mean, spiking out is not a good word because I find it's more spiral like. Literally, any concept has to do with the world you put it in regards to how it becomes intelligent. I'll give you an example of this. Maybe it's good to share. Let's take the concept of, let me do something that's going to challenge me too. Let's say we look at let's say you look at um, people's phones, and you suddenly see that if I think of a phone right now, I think of maybe like an iPhone, or like Android, like some sort of phone. But if I was to take that concept, that literally that image of the phone, okay, and now put that into a world, in a world that is different, the same meaning. It's as if you never, the past is gone. You are just experiencing it in the moment in a way where you're changing it. Every memory you remember, you change the memory by doing it. And it's not that you just change the memory, it's just that any activity requires a sort of change. It's as if the person doesn't move, how else can the cosmos have value? Literally, if you renounce the world too much, life becomes, to be honest, a picture. It becomes a picture. However, the fact that we are where we are, it's like there's a value to it. It's like, okay, so like imagine a child is born and you're like, we have really quick. Okay, here. Imagine a young child and an extraterrestrial alien come and ask, like a common man, what is this life like on Earth? And the common man looks at both beings and says, it's a world of dimensions that are here so experience occurs. Just like how the fruit on the tree, somehow the apple is like fit enough for the guy to hold it in his hand, for the human Homo sapien to hold it in his hand. So it's like similarly, a lot of what appears as external reality is adjusted to how we are designed to see it. And that is a mystery on its own, the fact of design in emptiness. So, pretty much, if everything is hovering in emptiness, what is design? Is design the creation of emptiness? Therefore, the question has to arise in people's minds. No longer people need to run in the streets to rebel. They have to internally stand on the top of the mountain and then move forward. Kind of like that Zen saying, like when you want to climb a mountain, start at the top. I ask myself, what is the value of the human mind? And I asked, like, it went to a point where I'm like, does it just lead to chaotic behavior? Or does it lead to ordered behavior? And I realized whatever I think about it, it will change. This is why the mind can't be put on the table. This is why the mind is an unknown movement of knowledge, and the body is a known movement of the unknown. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.